Well, a politician's job is to appeal to voters. Left-leaning voters don't like the NRA. Pat Davis is a Democrat running for Congress in New Mexico. Put two and two together, and Davis has produced a new ad where he expresses his view of the NRA unambiguously. But you decide.
The NRA. Their pro-gun policies have resulted in dead children, dead mothers, and dead fathers. I'm Pat Davis, and I approve this message because if Congress won't change our gun laws, we're changing Congress.
Pat Davis joins us tonight for New Mexico. Pat, thanks for coming on.
Hi, Tucker.
So that's the ad, F the NRA? Kind of moronic, no?
That's it, just 15 seconds, but it got a whole lot of attention and started a new conversation about guns, and I'm grateful for that.
But doesn't it degrade you? I mean, you use the F word in an ad. I mean, if you have a position, state it, but F the NRA? I mean, come on.
Well, Tucker, I mean, look, being polite, it hasn't made our schools any safer. It hasn't protected police officers like I used to be. You know, if a cuss word on TV offends you more than pictures of dead children in Parkland or Newtown, then your priorities are all wrong. I was a cop,
but it's not either or. Hold on, wait, so I don't care if you're a cop or not. Wait, hold on, wait. Let me ask you a question. It's not an either or. It's not that I'm so offended. Politeness doesn't work. Do you think rudeness will? Is rudeness going to save lives? Do you think?
Well, you know, as we were looking to make this ad, we kept coming up with the same idea, and every ad idea we came up with to talk about this issue looked like somebody else's, and those had not worked. Clearly, this got the NRA's attention, and it has started a new conversation, both amongst candidates running for office about how we organize and take back Congress and put new leaders there to take on gun control, but also how we stand up to the NRA. I mean, we know what works. 50% of NRA members.
No, it's started a conversation about how embarrassing you are. I mean, how many NRA members have committed mass shootings?
Well, but Tucker, here's the thing. A majority of Americans, 89% of police officers, a majority of NRA
here's
members
the thing is the quote. No, here's the thing is I asked you a direct way. No, hold on. Here's the thing.
We can. Yeah.
You wait. So you just released an ad that said "F the NRA," which I'm sure back at your fraternity house they loved. But let me ask you an adult question: how many NRA members have committed mass shootings?
Tucker, this is about the organization itself. My family grew up when I was growing up.
I'm asking you about the organization
members of
itself.
The NRA. It's not the NRA than my dad's organization. It is when their only response to a mass shooting. But how many members? But how many of their members? Hold on, they have millions of members. How many of them have? They do, and I've been hearing from them all week. Look, I've been hearing from them all week because the NRA made this their target. We've started a new conversation, and what I've also heard from are parents in Parkland, in Virginia, in Newtown who donated to keep the ad on the air because they want people in Congress to finally step up.
So you're really doing a public service.
If the NRA wants to
let me give you a little more publicity by putting
regulations that their members support.
Come to the table. You just said F the NRA.
We're not waiting on them to come to the table.
Yeah, we're really trying to have an adult conversation. So here's your new spot. And I want to talk to policy and see what you know about it. So here's your latest 15-second ad.
By the time this ad is done, an AR-15 could have fired 150 bullets. That's why we need to ban assault weapons. I'm Pat Davis, running for Congress, and I approve this message because lives are more important than gun company profits.
So you just said that in 15 seconds, an AR-15 can fire 150 rounds. Is that true?
That's right. That's right.
Well, how would that work
right
exactly?
Here in New Mexico. Right here in New Mexico, you can go to a parking lot or go on the internet, buy an assault weapon, an AR-15, and buy a legally available add-on like a bump stock that allows you to replicate exactly what happened in Las Vegas. The Las Vegas shooter could shoot 600
wait, hold on, wait. Are you saying you're saying an AR-15 can shoot 150 rounds in 15 seconds? So would it have a 150 round magazine? What would that? Hold on, let me ask you. Let's be specific. That's your ad. What would that magazine look like, the 150-round magazine?
Exactly like the magazines that Las Vegas police officers pulled out of that hotel room. They had 50 and 100-round magazines, and that weapon was capable.
Oh.
No,
and
50
so you can fire. It is physically possible to fire. It's not. I mean, these are rhetorical questions. You don't know what you're talking about. And I know that you were a police officer. You claim to have been.
Yeah.
No AR-15 can fire 150 rounds in 15 seconds. That's untrue. And if you believe it is true, then you're not qualified to have a conversation about guns. People are laughing at you because you are ignorant. You don't know what you're talking about. No, that's just untrue.
We take exactly the word of the police officers in Las Vegas, who I trust, who ran into that room to save people down below and found the weapons that were modified with bump stocks that would allow them to do that.
So they say an AR-15 can shoot. What do you think would happen to the barrel in 15 seconds if you put 150 rounds? It would melt. So I guess my point is, if you're going to take on the NRA and be Mr. Tough, I was a cop guy, maybe you should know what you're talking about, but you don't. You're putting something on television that's demonstrably wrong, that's physically impossible, and all of your voters are like, oh, yeah, this guy knows what he's talking about. He was a cop. But you don't know. So maybe you should apologize for it.
I'm not apologizing for taking on the NRA.
I'm just trying to.
Doing it.
Oh, okay. I think you should apologize for saying something that's factually untrue.
Have not changed the conversation. We need new folks to take over.
Yeah, that's why I'm not being polite. I'm trying to get a real conversation going here. Yep. But you don't know what you're talking about, so maybe you shouldn't be in a position to make decisions because you don't understand the issue. Because you just told me with a straight face that an AR-15 can fire 150 rounds in 15 seconds. Ooh, surprise, it can't. So maybe you should admit that and move on to something you understand. Would you do that?
Tucker, we're going to go. We're not. This is exactly the type of arguments that don't get us where we need to be. We need new leaders in Congress.
Oh, it's not like F the NRA. That's the kind of argument we need. Oh, I thought politeness didn't work, tough guy.
Politeness is not working so far. If you woke up on Mother's Day and don't have your kid anymore,
you know what works? Actually, facts work. Why don't you get some facts? Oh, Pat, do you like this new mode of communication we have? F the NRA, Pat.
It'd be great to have
tough guy.
It'd be great
Learn
to have
something
a
about
conversation
guns and get back to me. Interview over. Yeah, because you don't know what you're talking about. Let's go back to politeness.
The late night talk show host talking about gun control. We have Steve Doocy that's in Las Vegas live anchoring the show from out there. We also want to bring in Ben Shapiro. He's from thedailywire.com, a syndicated columnist and host of the Ben Shapiro Show, to talk about this very issue with the late night host.
Steve, you have a question for Ben?
Absolutely. Ben, I got a question for you. You know, many, as we just saw the late night host talking about how there needs to be more gun control. But when you look at what they found in the car of this guy, that ammonium nitrate, you just add the fuel oil to it, and you've got an Oklahoma City bomb there as well. What gun control law would have stopped that guy from doing what he did back there?
I mean, even the guns that he was using, I'm not sure that there's any evidence that gun control would have done anything. I mean, he obtained, apparently, these weapons legally. He had gone through federal background checks. There's no evidence of significant mental illness to this point. So all this seems like is people shouting, do something, while they have no particular solutions and no expertise on guns or gun control. I mean, the suggestion that gun control is going to put an end to incidents like this, again, that is an evidenceless proposition based on nothing but emotional response.
I was looking at Jimmy Kimmel last night, and he said, well, for those of you on television all day that tell me not to talk about gun control, my First Amendment is just as important as your Second Amendment. Ben, what's your reaction to that?
Well, I mean, no one is talking about stopping him from talking. I mean, I would never try to ban Jimmy Kimmel from talking on television. He should stop trying to ban me from owning a firearm. And again, nothing that the late night hosts are saying has any sort of relationship to reality. If they want to call for an outright gun ban, if they want to call for all guns in the United States to be removed, then we can at least get an honest assessment of what it is they believe. But when they say things like a little bit of common sense gun control would stop all of this, that's just a chimera. It's not true. They're making things up because this is all about the moral disapproval of people who own guns. And that's what drips from a lot of these folks, is this idea that if you oppose them on policy, it's because you don't care enough about what happened in Las Vegas. And that really is, that's quite disgusting. I mean, the idea that if we disagree on politics, it's because my heart isn't big enough, but your heart is just big enough so you understand Jimmy Kimmel or Stephen Colbert or Seth Meyers. You understand truly what America needs because you care so much. That's pretty nasty stuff.
So what is the issue here? What do we need to be talking about?
Well, I mean, I think we don't have enough information yet to know what sort of policy proposals would be on the table. This is one of the things that drives me nuts about this. Mass shootings are actually a pretty terrible way of determining policy because the sample size is so low, because it tends to be non-representative of deaths involving guns in the United States overall, for a variety of reasons. I mean, if we actually want to talk about gun violence across the United States, we'd actually have to start talking about, if you're going to talk gun control, then let's talk about democratic areas in major cities, because that's where virtually all of the murder, or at least a huge percentage of the murder, is taking place in the United States. Even that, though, would be, I think, a false premise, because the fact is that the number of guns in the United States has gone up as the murder rate has gone down. Per capita, there are now 1.45 guns per American in the United States. There were less than 1 gun per Americans in the United States in 1993, and the murder rate has declined markedly since that time. So the idea that more guns equals more crime, or more guns invariably equals more mass shooting, the evidence is really weak on this stuff.
Yeah, so what does that tell you? Does that tell you that more people owning guns with murder rates going down? Is it because we feel like using a gun we can protect ourselves more, or owning a gun?
Well, I mean, I think there's a case to be made for that. The truth is that correlation in these cases doesn't always equal causation. So saying more guns, less crime, it may be just as wrong as saying less guns, more crime. But by the same token, to suggest that if we just remove guns, that's going to send the crime rate down, it's not true. People keep talking about things like Australia, where there was a big gun buyback. And the fact is that in Australia, they only removed 1/3 to 1/5 of guns. The gun crime rate was declining markedly before that, and the United States is not the same as Australia. Try going to Texas and telling everybody they need to hand their guns over to the federal government and see how the gun rate, the gun death rate goes up.
That, I also tell the people in England how safe they are when they've had 5 attacks over the last year, and they have very few guns over there, as well as France.
Even law enforcement doesn't carry guns, right?
As well as Spain. True, good point, Ainsley. And finally, I didn't know, I'm not a gun guy, I don't pretend to be, but now I'm finding about these bump fire stocks that allow a semi-automatic to be an automatic. And the fact is, according to the ATF, it was actually legal to do. Would you, as a pro-gun guy, entertain the fact that we get rid of some of that conversion?
Yeah, I think I would. I mean, the fact is that the machine guns have been illegal for sale since 1986 in the United States. Devices that can convert a semi-auto to fire like an auto, I think there's pretty widespread support for getting rid of some of these devices. That said, a bump stock is very easy to make yourself, to imitate. Firing a semi-auto at a high rate is not particularly difficult to train to do. So I think that we can do it. I wouldn't use it as this sort of this panacea. I don't think that you can use it as a cure-all. The idea that that would cure these problems. The vast majority of mass shootings have not taken place with automatic weapons or even semi-autos being fired like autos. They've been with semi-automatic rifles or mostly with handguns.
Okay. Ben Shapiro, thank you for joining us.